thinking with our creative brains now. Want to talk about just a little bit of when we're rolling out communication strategy, what have we seen that are really kind of fun, unique, memorable ways that organizational strategy has been shared out to staff. So it's heard, understood, appreciated, and people are like, I get it. That was cool. That was a cool way of rolling out strategy. Anyone have some experiences of like, hey, I experienced something that was kind of a real cool way of rolling out organizational strategy, and here's how it was done. Anyone?
So I'll go. I've used strategy maps to tell a story. So that's using things like the balanced scorecard, the four tracks of that, but it lets you take people on the journey about why their role matters and how they can align themselves with your vision. So my experience is it tends to be something that you do in relatively small groups, but being able to use it I've used it where I've deployed it to managers and they then deployed it in their teams, and it's a great way of cascading.
Yeah.
Giving people that view. I mean, that famous story of, was it JFK going up to the floor sweeper in NASA going, what are you doing? Helping put people on the moon. It's so apocryphal, that story. It's rolled out on every MBA course, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And if you can get people to understand how they contribute to your vision and the steps, the thing I like about it is steps. It's understandable steps to, oh, if I do this, that leads to that, that helps that, and look, and suddenly they can see the connection. And I've really seen that work strongly.
Yeah, I've seen really thoughtful ways of rolling out organizational strategy where members of the leadership team were all co-hosts and shared out respective, strategic goals like the long-term horizon, the pillars of the plan, and each one spoke to a respective pillar at a very high elevation. That was like done in a town hall. So anybody who was physically present, and those that were remote were just, zoomed in and were, seeing the audio and visual feed. But then each executive leader then broke out with their respective departments and divisions, and then cascaded that story more to, okay, here's what it means for our team, our group, our department, and starting to cascade, here's our focus area for the next year, strategically, how we're going to measure that success as our group in the upcoming year. Here's like the kind of quarterly key results and the milestones that we're going to move and tackle and achieve throughout the year. And then I saw that even cascade down to smaller teams. So kind of went from that 20,000 foot level down to the 10, down to the 5, all the way down to kind of like individual teams. And that was super cool to see that, a very cascading approach that was jointly, shared out by each member of the leadership team.
So I have an example.
Yeah.
I worked for recently, last year, worked for a county health department, and one of the strategies we had to implement was a racial health equity strategic plan, which is something that we hadn't done. And we went about it a little bit differently. We definitely had buy-in from leadership, and I was a director of a division. But I developed an internal equity group, and the directors recommended one of their staffers to this equity group. And within the equity group, they came up with the approach and strategies that they felt were important. And so they were the liaisons to their different divisions. And by doing so, we felt that having sort of their peers convey the information, the strategy, and get their input, it was more impactful. It felt more genuine, as as opposed to the administration saying, oh, you have to do this. And so I was just blown away by what they identified as opportunities to show support and equity. I mean, we started small, right? Because it can be overwhelming. So they did things like, we can put our pronouns in our signatures and our emails. You know, that's one way to start, right? It's sort of less intrusive. And then it grew to where they had strategies associated with the board, how the board was designated and all of that. And so getting support from the leadership, but then allowing the staff to sort of take the lead and control of that, I think was very effective.
Yeah, and to play off that point, to mitigate that kind of perspective of, oh, this is just kind of like the classic leadership hierarchy rollout, is, often strategies are built and implemented by, these cross-functional teams. It's really fun to have like the cross-functional teams represent and share out their respective contribution to the strategy, because it kind of flattens and collapses that kind of classical departmental silo thinking. Is, when the strategy is shared out by, cross-functional representation across the organization, cross-functional groups. I think also people love the visual storytelling, having the visuals of even the key performance indicators. Here's the embedded strategic KPIs that are in our plan. Visualize those, see where we're at today, where we see that KPI being in the future, and we can visualize and then see that, okay, how are we going to get from where we're at today to where we need to be in the future as it relates to this KPI. And it's kind of like these visual KPI kind of scorecards, that are just like, wow, grounding 3 to 5 core KPIs that are embedded in our strategy. I can see it, I can feel it. It's making it memorable. So I definitely have seen really cool things done from a visual graphic perspectives that, people can see the strategy and not just hear it.
I would add that I think this is where a lot of leadership teams fall down and make mistakes, because they're not as good at communicating as they think they are. And you really should engage, I think, pulling somebody who's a really good communicator that thinks who the audience is, or the respective audiences, and what the message means to them. And not only that, but your campaign should be never ending. Right? Some people say, well, we did this kickoff and the strategy's out there. And people got, a little piece of it, rather than that continuous repetitive.
Yeah. And it's like that launch and leave mentality, like, oh, let's launch our organizational strategy. And okay, now let's leave it. That was an event. We're done. What's up next? Is the launch of the process begins with the articulation of strategy. And then during that saying, okay, on a quarterly basis, we're going to share out with you these critical few areas, because they will really provide like the insight and perspective on, are we moving the needle? And so I think the rollout of strategy is not an event. It's not a launch and leave. It's not a one and done. Set the structure for how we're going to communicate those things that are meaningful to the team. And I think, from a communication perspective, is know your audience. Know your audience and what's important to them, because they are looking for the personal win. Very cool. All right. So key takeaways. Keep it simple. We love the one-page plan. Use visual storytelling. Allow people to see and hear the strategy together. Allow the strategy to be shared by cross-functional teams and not classic hierarchy of leadership. Allow the audience to contribute in sharing the story themselves, because at the end of the day, it's all of our story, not just the story of leadership. So 1-page plan, keep it simple. Allow staff to be part of the journey and sharing the story. I think that's a really good takeaway.
I think
Yeah.
that's where you get the collective genius, right? I mean, if you've done a good job of communicating your strategy and your vision and those types of things, if it's done well, people engage with it, and the early adopters will start solving problems and doing the things that need to be done, and all of a sudden you get a bubble up.
Yeah.
That's where you get traction.
Yeah.
They'll, in other words, my belief, right, our belief is that we want to give people enough direction so that they understand where we're going and how we want to get there, but not tell them how to do it. That's where you get, I mean, because the people on the front line are the ones that really know how to do it, and they'll figure out the best ways.
Yeah. So make it our story, make it memorable, and make it part of the process. You know, don't do the launch and leave. Allow strategy to have that heartbeat so people always connect with it, because there are those aha moments where you struck a chord and it becomes part of the DNA, or like, whoa, we just pulled off something really cool and really great with this. And we're also building a killer culture at the same time when we do that.